I also have found, though, since the 2 years that the Dobbs decision came down that this happened, I have had conversations with a number of people who were opposed to abortion and remain opposed to it, but did not intend for the harm that we are seeing to happen. And I think as this decision came down and we are seeing the harm,
we've been listening to Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney campaigning together in Brookfield, Wisconsin. We'll continue to watch. But joining me at the big table tonight is Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent for Vanity Fair, Democratic strategist and pollster Cornell Belcher, and NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. I mean, that was quite, and we've seen some thematics today where they talk a lot about threats to democracy. Also, abortion rates has come up repeatedly at these events, which is really interesting. I want to talk about both of them. Ali, I want to start with you because you are the hardest working person on the campaign trail. You're out there, very hardworking people, but you covered Nikki Haley for months, also Trump, but for months. And one of the things that struck me watching today is that clearly, Vice President Harris and her team see that there are undecided voters out there, that they're still gettable, and that these type of events are a way to do that. But you're still talking to Haley voters. What do they think? Does this work, and what works with them?
Yeah, covered Nikki Haley for months. I've covered Donald Trump for years, back since the 2015 days.
Sorry.
But I'm fine. But I do think that these kinds of events are exactly what Haley voters have wanted to hear. Now, whether or not it actually persuades them, I guess we'll find out on Election Day. But I do think that this is the message that was the most salient. And I have to say, when I was out in Iowa and then New Hampshire, then South Carolina during the Republican primary, I was almost surprised, actually, to hear from the number of voters who said, I was a Trump voter in 16, I was a Trump voter in 20, I'm not anymore because of January 6th. And I think the polling might have maybe told us that those hearings were not as impactful as maybe we thought they might be. I found that to be a little bit depressing, given the way that we all love the Capitol. To me, it's like a second home in a good way and a bad way. But the fact that so many of those voters said it was such a turning point for them, such an inflection point for them to finally put them away from Trump, these are the kinds of voters that they are speaking directly to as they go to battleground states. And the abortion issue, if it's not January 6th, it's abortion, because I have literally met women who said to me, I was a Republican and I changed my voter registration to independent the day after Dobbs because I was embarrassed to be a Republican.
The way that question was asked about how it's not about the lives of babies, I'm paraphrasing here, it's about controlling women. It's really interesting. Okay, Cornell, Ali touched on a really interesting point there, because people say January 6th doesn't matter, democracy doesn't matter, although democracy has mattered in past elections for sure. And I wanted to ask you about this undecided voter question, because you're actually very dug into the numbers more than the rest of us. How many undecided voters are there out there? Where are they leaning? Is this the kind of thing that works? It seems clear that Harris is closing this campaign trying to appeal to undecided voters, which is smart. It's expanding the base.
Well, there's the undecided vote, and there's also what we call that malleable voter that's still sort of in the middle, kind of softly leaning one way or the other. And I think for this sort of the event, I mean, there are Republicans who are uncomfortable with the idea of voting Democrat. And
because they've done it so long.
Because they've done it so long, Republican. But they believe in sort of core conservative ideas that made them Republican. And I got to tell you, there's no more or better representative of traditional conservative values than a Cheney in America. That's a pretty good Republican conservative brand. You know, and being out there on the trail with them, having these conversations with a Cheney, and a Cheney leaning in on how she supports the vice president, leaning in on the sort of democracy point of this, I think it does help some of these reluctant Republicans move this way. Now, is it going to be, 20, 30% of them? No. But in a state like Pennsylvania, and a state like North Carolina,
Wisconsin,
and a state like Nevada, 4 or 5%. These elections will be won or lost by a percentage or two. It does help with those Nikki voters who be like, oh. And then go, but if Liz Cheney's doing it, might be okay.
Which we should point out, Nikki Haley voters might be up for compromise on this. Nikki Haley herself is an endorser of Donald Trump and came back right home to the party.
That is true, but the voters themselves, because we've shorthanded that as kind of some of the gettable voters. We'll see. There was something that Liz Cheney said earlier today, actually about abortion rights, which just stuck out to me. I mean, she has a very powerful message on democracy. She's been doing it. It's really impactful. But let's just play what she said about abortion earlier. We're just going to pull it up, and we're going to get to it in a moment. Then I want to ask you about it, Molly. They're going to tell me when it's ready.
Well, can I make one?
Okay, we're good. We can play it. Okay. Let's play it.
I think there are many of us around the country who have been pro-life, but who have watched what's going on in our states since the Dobbs decision, and have watched state legislatures put in place laws that are resulting in women not getting the care they need. And so I think this is not an issue that we're seeing break down across party lines, right. But I think we're seeing people come together to say what has happened to women when women are facing situations where they can't get the care they need, where in places like Texas, for example, the Attorney General is talking about suing to get access to women's medical records. That's not sustainable for us as a country, and it has to change.
I thought this was an incredibly powerful moment because it's a very bridge-building message. As a proud defender for a long time of abortion rights, that was a bridge-building message, or that's how I heard it. Now, one of the things it reminded me of is white women voters who have been a voting bloc that went for Trump by 9 points in 16 and 11 points. 11 points 4 years ago. Right now, it's about tied in most of the polls, including the NBC poll. Abortion rights seems core to that. But what do you think? You've been writing about, covering this issue for some time.
Yeah, I mean, look, abortion I think, has been a huge motivator. And I think what Cheney said is really important, this idea that this is not, that it's really about women sort of not getting care. And we see that in a lot of the reporting, like that Lift Louisiana report came out to show that you had these obstetricians who were scared to treat women in the first trimester because they didn't want to get blamed for a miscarriage. And CNN just had reporting about this high rate, Texas overturned Roe a year before with this state Bill 8. And so they have now almost 3 years worth of data. And it shows that you have increased fetal mortality. You have these women who are walking coffins, right? They are delivering babies that are going to die in the excess of the hundreds. And it's, this is because they cannot get care. And, as someone who was pregnant twice and who knows what a struggle it is, this is just not a way that women should have to live in this era.